The morning arrived with no mercy. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones before you even open your eyes. The kind that makes you wonder if you'll see another sunrise. Mary Running Deer woke to the sound of her baby's whimpering. The fire had died sometime in the night, and frost covered the inside walls of their small shelter. She pulled the thin blanket tighter around herself and her daughter, feeling the child's small body shivering against her chest. "Hush now, little one," she whispered, her breath forming clouds in the frozen air. "Mama's here." But being here wasn't enough. Not today. Not in this cold. Mary was 23 years old, though the hard frontier life made her look older. Her story was complicated, the kind that didn't fit neatly into the boxes people like to use. She'd been born white, taken by Comanche raiders when she was just 7, raised in their ways, married one of their warriors. And when he fell defending their people, she became a widow with nowhere to truly belong. The white settlers near Fort Griffin looked at her with suspicion, too Comanche in their eyes. The Comanche people, scattered and struggling, couldn't take in another mouth to feed. So Mary existed in between, in a tiny shelter on the edge of the settlement with her 6-month-old daughter, Grace. She named the baby Grace because that's what the child represented, a small mercy in a world that offered few. Mary rose slowly, her joints stiff from cold and hunger. They'd had nothing but thin soup for 2 days. The firewood was gone. The nearest neighbor, the Miller family, lived 3 miles away through open prairie. 3 miles that might as well have been 30 in weather like this. She looked down at Grace, wrapped in every piece of cloth they owned. The baby's lips had a bluish tint. Her tiny fingers felt like ice. Fear gripped Mary's chest sharper than the cold. She'd seen this before. Babies didn't survive when they got this cold. Not out here. Not without help. "We're going for a walk, little bird," Mary said, trying to keep her voice steady. She strapped Grace tight against her chest with a leather sling her husband had made before he died. Then she wrapped her worn buffalo hide around them both. Her moccasins were thin, patched too many times. They'd have to do. The door scraped open and the wind hit her like a fist. Snow had fallen through the night, covering everything in white. The sun was up but gave no warmth, just a pale light that made the snow glitter like broken glass. Mary knew this land. She'd traveled it in summer heat and autumn rain, but winter was different. Winter showed no mercy to the unprepared. And she was woefully unprepared. Still, what choice did she have? Grace needed warmth. She needed food. The Miller family had both. They were decent people, unlike some of the others who'd threatened to run Mary off more than once. Mrs. Miller had even brought them bread a few weeks back, though her husband didn't know about it. Mary started walking, each step crunching through the snow. She talked to Grace as she went, partly to keep the baby calm and partly to keep herself moving. "Your father would have known what to do," she said softly. "He could track game in any weather. Could start a fire with stones and dry grass. Strong man, your father. Good man." The wind picked up, blowing snow into her face. Mary bent her head and pushed forward. One foot, then the other. Don't stop. Can't stop. After an hour, maybe more, she realized she'd made a mistake. The cold was worse than she'd thought. The distance was longer. Her feet were going numb. Grace had stopped whimpering. That was bad. The baby needed to cry, needed to stay alert. Mary opened the hide covering and rubbed the tiny arms, trying to bring warmth back into them. "Stay with me, little bird. Stay awake. We're almost there." But they weren't almost there. They were barely halfway. And the sky was getting darker. Mary's mind started playing tricks on her. She saw her husband walking ahead in the snow, turning to smile at her. She blinked and he was gone. She saw smoke rising from a chimney that wasn't there. Her thoughts grew fuzzy, confused. Keep moving. Just keep moving. Her legs felt heavy, like she was wading through mud instead of snow. Each step took more effort than the last. The wind howled, drowning out every other sound. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. Couldn't feel her hands, but she could feel Grace against her chest. "That small weight, that precious life, not you," Mary said through cracked lips. "You're going to make it. I promise you." Then her foot caught on something buried under the snow. A root or a rock, she never knew. Her numb legs couldn't correct, couldn't catch her. She fell forward, twisting at the last second to protect Grace from the impact. She landed hard on her side, the breath knocked from her lungs. Snow covered her face, filling her nose and mouth. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Panic flared hot in her chest. Grace, protect Grace. Mary forced herself to roll, to clear her face, to check the baby. Grace's eyes were closed, but she was breathing. Still breathing. Thank God, still breathing. Mary tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't hold her. She tried again, making it to her knees before falling once more. The cold had taken too much. Her body was shutting down. No, not like this. Not here. She looked up through the swirling snow and saw something dark ahead. A shape, a building. The old line shack that cattle drivers used in the summer. She'd forgotten about it. It wasn't much. Just 4 walls and a roof. But it was shelter. It was hope. Mary crawled, inch by inch, dragging herself through the snow with Grace clutched tight to her chest. Her arms screamed with effort. Her vision blurred. But she crawled. The door was half buried in a drift. She scraped at it with frozen hands, finally pulling it open just enough to squeeze through. The inside was dark and barely warmer than outside, but at least the wind couldn't reach them here. Mary collapsed against the far wall, every muscle trembling. She pulled Grace close, opened her dress despite the cold, and pressed the baby against her skin. Body heat. It was all she had left to give. "I'm sorry, little bird," she whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. I tried so hard. Outside, the storm grew worse. Snow piled against the walls. Darkness fell early, as it does in winter. Mary held her daughter and sang the old Comanche songs her adopted mother had taught her. Songs about the wind and the buffalo and the endless sky. She didn't know if anyone would find them. Didn't know if they'd survive the night. All she knew was that she'd gotten her baby to shelter. And if death came for them in this frozen place, at least they'd face it together. But Mary didn't know that less than 100 yards away, 5 soldiers from Fort Griffin were making camp, waiting out the same storm that had nearly killed her. She didn't know that her desperate journey was only beginning. She didn't know that before the next sunrise. She'd have to make a choice that would change everything. Mary didn't know how long she'd been lying there when she heard the voices. At first she thought she was dreaming, or dying. Sometimes the two felt the same out here, but no. There were voices. Men's voices carried on the wind. And something else. The low whinny of horses. The clank of metal on metal. She forced her eyes open. Through the cracks in the wooden walls she saw flickers of orange light. Fire. Someone had made a fire just outside, maybe 50 paces away. Her heart pounded hard against her ribs. People meant help. But people also meant danger. Especially for someone like her. Grace stirred against her chest, making a weak mewing sound. Mary's hand moved instinctively to the baby's back, feeling the tiny heartbeat. Still alive. Still fighting. "Shh, little bird," Mary breathed. "Let Mama think." She pulled herself up to peer through a gap in the boards. 5 men in dark blue uniforms sat around a fire, their horses tethered nearby. Soldiers from Fort Griffin. They'd made camp in the lee of some rocks, using the same storm shelter she'd been trying to reach. Mary's stomach twisted. She'd had run-ins with soldiers before. Some were decent. Others saw her Comanche braids and buckskin dress and decided she was something less than human. Her husband had died in a skirmish with cavalry 2 years back. These might be the very men who killed him, but Grace was dying. Mary could feel it. The baby's breathing was too shallow, her body too cold. Without warmth and food soon, she wouldn't see morning. What was her life worth against her daughter's? What was pride worth? What was fear? Mary looked down at Grace's tiny face, blue-tinged and still. She thought about her husband, about his last words before he rode out that final time. "Protect her," he'd said. "No matter what. Protect our daughter." She'd made a promise, and Mary Running Deer kept her promises. Her hands shook as she unwrapped Grace from her chest. Not from cold this time, from terror, from the awful weight of what she was about to do. She wrapped the baby in the cleanest piece of cloth she had, then held her close one more time. "Forgive me if I'm wrong," she whispered against the baby's forehead. "Forgive me if they hurt us. But I can't watch you die without trying." The door fought her. Ice had formed along the edges, and her arms had almost no strength left. She pushed harder, gasping with effort until finally it scraped open enough for her to slip through. The cold hit her like a wall. The fire looked impossibly far away, though it was only steps. She could see the soldiers clearly now. 5 of them, older men mostly, except for one young private who couldn't have been more than 19. Mary took a breath and stepped into their firelight. The reaction was instant. All 5 men jumped to their feet, hands flying to their weapons. The sergeant, a thick-built man, with gray in his beard, had his rifle up and pointed at her chest before she could blink. "Don't move," he barked. Mary didn't move. She couldn't have if she wanted to. Her legs were barely holding her upright. She stood there in the firelight, a Comanche widow holding a dying baby, facing 5 armed soldiers who might kill her where she stood. For a moment, nobody spoke. The wind howled. Snow swirled between them. The fire crackled and popped. Then Grace made a sound. Not a cry exactly, more like a sigh. The sound of a life slipping away. Something broke inside Mary. All the fear, all the pride, all the careful walls she'd built to survive in a world that wanted her gone. It all crumbled. She fell to her knees in the snow. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. She pulled back the cloth covering Grace's face. Let them see the innocent life in her arms. "If you take me last. Save my baby first." The words came pouring out, desperate and raw. "She has done nothing, nothing. She is innocent. Whatever you think of me, whatever you want to do to me, I don't care. But please, please save her first. She's so cold. She won't make it through the night. I beg you on my knees. Take me last. Save my baby first." Tears streamed down her face, freezing on her cheeks. She held Grace out toward them, offering her only treasure to the men who might be her enemies. "Please," she whispered one more time. "Please!" The sergeant still had his rifle raised, but something in his face changed. Mary saw it happen, saw the hardness crack, saw something human break through. He lowered the rifle slowly. "Nobody's taking anybody," he said, his voice rough. He turned to the others. "Well, don't just stand there. Get that woman by the fire." The young private moved first, rushing forward to help Mary to her feet. His hands were gentle despite his nervousness. Another soldier, a lean man with kind eyes, took Grace from Mary's arms. "Lord have mercy, this baby's near frozen," he said, already moving toward the fire. "Thompson, get those blankets heated. Riley, warm some water, move." Everything happened fast after that. Strong hands guided Mary to the fire. Someone wrapped a warm coat around her shoulders. Another soldier was already working on Grace, rubbing her tiny arms and legs, trying to bring feeling back into them. Mary watched through tears and exhaustion as these men, these soldiers she'd been so afraid of, worked to save her daughter. They moved with purpose, with care. The sergeant barked orders. The private heated stones to wrap in blankets. The one called Riley mixed something warm for the baby to drink. "What's your name?" the sergeant asked, crouching beside Mary. "Mary," she managed. "Mary Running Deer," he nodded once. "I'm Sergeant Patrick. These are my men. We're going to help you and your little one. You hear me? We're going to help." Mary couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but nod and watch as they worked on Grace. The baby was so still. Too still. "Come on, little miss," the lean soldier murmured, rubbing warmth into Grace's feet. "Come on back to us now. Your mama needs you to fight." Minutes crawled by like hours. Mary sat frozen, not from cold but from fear, from hope, from the terrible waiting. Then Grace coughed. A small sound, but it was life. It was breath. It was everything. "There she is," the soldier grinned. "There's our girl." Grace's eyes fluttered open. She looked confused, overwhelmed by the light and noise and strange faces. Then she started to cry. A weak, wavering cry, but the most beautiful sound Mary had ever heard. "Oh, thank God," Mary sobbed, reaching for her daughter. "Thank God, thank God." They let her hold Grace by the fire, keeping them both wrapped in warm blankets. Someone pressed a cup of hot coffee into Mary's hands. The young private offered her hardtack and dried beef from his own rations. "Eat, ma'am," he said quietly. "You need your strength." Mary looked around at these 5 men, these soldiers who could have turned her away, who could have done worse. Instead, they'd chosen mercy. They'd chosen to see a mother and child who needed help, nothing more and nothing less. "Why?" she asked Sergeant Patrick, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you help us?" The sergeant stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "I had a daughter once," he said finally. "Lost her to winter fever while I was away at war. Same age as yours, near enough." He looked at Mary and she saw old pain in his eyes. "Couldn't save her. But maybe I can save yours." The storm raged on outside their small circle of firelight, but inside a mother held her breathing baby. 5 soldiers shared their warmth and food with strangers they'd been taught to fear. And for one night at least, humanity won out over hatred. Mary closed her eyes and held Grace close, feeling the baby's heartbeat strong and steady against her chest. They'd survived. Against all odds, they'd survived. But the long night was just beginning, and morning would bring new questions. New challenges. The world beyond the firelight was still cold and unforgiving. For now, though, there was warmth. There was life. And there was hope. The night stretched long and cold. But inside their small circle of firelight, something unexpected was happening. 5 soldiers and 1 Comanche widow were learning they had more in common than they'd ever imagined. Grace slept fitfully in Mary's arms, wrapped in layers of wool blankets the men had heated by the fire. Every time the baby stirred or whimpered, one of the soldiers would wake and check on them. They took turns keeping the fire fed, making sure the flames never died down. Mary watched them through heavy eyelids, still not quite believing what was happening. These men who could have been her enemies were treating her child like she was precious, like she mattered. "Can't sleep?" Sergeant Patrick asked, settling down beside her with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. "Afraid if I do I'll wake up and this will all be a dream," Mary admitted. "Or Grace will stop breathing." "She's a fighter, that one," Patrick said, nodding at the baby. "Takes after her mother, I'd wager." Mary smiled weakly. Her father, too. He was brave, stubborn, wouldn't back down from anything. Patrick was quiet for a moment. "The war? A fight over land that wasn't really anyone's to begin with," Mary said. "Or maybe it was everyone's, I don't know anymore. I just know he died for it, and now Grace and I are alone." The sergeant stared into his coffee. "War makes widows of all kinds. White, Comanche, Mexican. Grief don't care what language you speak." From across the fire, the young private spoke up. His name was Danny, and he'd barely said 2 words all evening. "My ma was widowed twice," he said quietly. "First husband killed by Comanche raiders. Second husband killed fighting Comanche warriors. She used to say hate was easy, but it never brought nobody back." Mary looked at him, this boy who had every reason to despise her. "I'm sorry for your mother's losses." "She'd have liked you," Danny said with a sad smile. "Would have said any woman who'd walk 3 miles through a blizzard for her baby was worth knowing, no matter where she came from." The lean soldier, whose name was William, poked at the fire with a stick. "My sister married a Mexican fellow down in San Antonio. Family disowned her for it. Haven't spoken to her in 5 years." He shook his head. "I was too much of a coward to stand up for her. Too worried what people would think. I think about that a lot. About the chances we miss to be decent because we're too busy being afraid." "Fear makes fools of us all," said another soldier, an older man called Robert. "I'm from Pennsylvania originally. Fought in the war between the states. Brother fought for the other side. We didn't speak for 10 years after. 10 years wasted because we were too proud to admit we both might have been wrong about some things." Mary listened to them share their stories, these men opening up their hurts in the darkness. She realized they weren't so different from her. Everyone here had lost something. Everyone carried scars. "I was 7 when the Comanche took me," Mary said softly. The men fell silent, listening. "I was picking wildflowers near our homestead. My mother was hanging laundry. I remember her screaming my name. That's the last time I heard her voice." "God almighty," William breathed. "The Comanche woman who raised me, she wasn't cruel," Mary continued. "She'd lost her own daughter to fever. I think maybe she saw in me a chance to be a mother again. She taught me everything. How to cure hides, how to find water, how to read the weather. She sang to me, held me when I cried for my birth mother." "Did you ever try to escape?" Danny asked, his young face curious rather than judgmental. "At first, yes. But where would I go? I was a child. Miles and miles from anything I knew. And as time passed, I forgot some things. The Comanche ways became my ways. When I was old enough, I married a good man. He was kind to me. Protected me. We had Grace." She looked down at her sleeping daughter. "Then he was gone and I was caught between 2 worlds again. Too white for the Comanche. Too Comanche for the whites." Sergeant Patrick cleared his throat roughly. "That's a heavy load for one person to carry." "We all carry heavy loads," Mary said. "Don't we?" The 5th soldier, a quiet man named Joseph who hadn't spoken much all night, finally raised his head. "My wife died birthing our son 3 years back. The baby, too. I came out here because I couldn't stand being in that house anymore. Everything reminded me of what I lost." His voice was thick with old grief. "But sitting here tonight, watching you with your little girl, it reminds me why I became a soldier in the first place." To protect people. To stand between families and harm. Somewhere along the way I forgot that. Started seeing enemies instead of people. Grace stirred then, making small sounds. Mary adjusted her hold, rocking gently. The baby's eyes opened, clearer now than before. She looked around at all the strange faces watching her. "Hello there, little miss," William said gently. "Welcome back." Grace blinked at him, then made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been gas. Either way, it made the men smile. "She's got color back in her cheeks," Danny observed. "That's good, right?" "That's very good," Mary said, relief flooding through her. She touched Grace's forehead. "No longer ice cold, warm, alive. What happens now?" Robert asked. "Can't send you back out in this weather. Storm's getting worse, if anything." "We wait it out," Patrick decided. "Come morning, we escort them both to Fort Griffin. Get the doctor to look at the baby proper. Make sure she's truly out of danger." Mary's chest tightened. "The fort? They won't want me there." "They'll deal with it," Patrick said firmly. "Any man has a problem with us helping a mother and child, he can take it up with me. And I don't lose arguments often." "What about after?" Mary asked quietly. "Where do we go after the doctor sees her?" The men exchanged glances. It was William who spoke first. "The Miller family. They're decent folk. My cousin knows them. They might take you in, give you work." "We'll put in a good word," Patrick added. "Tell them what happened here tonight. Anyone with half a heart will help after hearing it." "And if they won't?" Mary's voice was small. "Then we'll find someone who will," Danny said with surprising conviction. "We didn't save you just to let you freeze a week from now." Mary felt tears burning in her eyes again, but different tears this time. Not despair. Something else. Something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, looking around at each face. "Really, you don't know me? You don't owe me anything." Sergeant Patrick was quiet for a long moment watching the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "My daughter's name was Catherine. She was 6 months old when the fever took her. I was 200 miles away, fighting a war that don't make much sense looking back on it now. My wife wrote me letters telling me Catherine was sick, getting worse. By the time I got the letter saying she'd passed, she'd been in the ground 3 weeks already." He looked up at Mary, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I never got to say goodbye to my little girl, never got to hold her one last time, never got to do a damn thing to save her. But tonight I could do something. Tonight I could help a father's daughter live. Maybe somewhere, somehow, that balances the scales a little bit. Maybe someone helped my Catherine when I couldn't be there. Maybe that's how the world works when we let it." The fire crackled. The wind howled. Grace made soft sleeping sounds. "Thank you," Mary whispered. "Thank you all." "Get some rest," Patrick said gruffly, standing up and brushing snow from his pants. "We'll keep watch. You and the little one are safe here." Mary lay down with Grace tucked close, wrapped in borrowed warmth and unexpected kindness. Around her, 5 soldiers stood guard through the frozen night. Not because they had to, not because of duty or orders, because they'd chosen to see a mother instead of an enemy, a baby instead of a threat, humanity instead of hate, and sometimes on the coldest of nights that choice makes all the difference. Mary closed her eyes and felt Grace's steady breathing against her chest. They would survive this night. And maybe, just maybe, they'd survive whatever came next too. The storm raged on, but inside their circle, something warmer than fire was burning. Something that no winter could extinguish. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight they'd found something worth fighting for. Each other. Dawn came slowly, painting the snow-covered world in shades of pink and gold. Mary woke to the sound of horses shuffling and men's low voices. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then she felt Grace's warm weight against her chest and everything came rushing back. They'd made it through the night. "Morning," Sergeant Patrick said, handing her a tin cup of coffee. "Baby sleep all right?" Mary nodded, looking down at Grace. The baby's cheeks were pink and healthy. Her breathing was steady and strong. "She's better. So much better. I can't believe it." "Believe it," Patrick said with a slight smile. "That's one tough little girl you've got there." The other soldiers were already breaking camp, packing up their gear and preparing the horses for travel. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by white. Everything looked clean and new in the morning light, like the earth had been given a fresh start. "How far to the fort?" Mary asked, her stomach knotting with anxiety. 3 hours on horseback, maybe 4 in this snow, William said, checking the saddle on his horse. We'll take it slow. No sense rushing and risking another fall. Danny brought over a blanket he'd fashioned into a sling. Figured you could carry the baby like this. Keep your hands free to hold on to the saddle. Mary took it, touched by the thoughtfulness. Thank you. You've all been so kind. Just doing what's right, Danny said, but his cheeks colored a bit. They set out as the sun climbed higher, 5 soldiers and 1 widow with a baby, making their way across the frozen prairie. Mary rode behind William, holding tight to his coat while Grace slept peacefully in her sling. The world was quiet except for the crunch of hooves in snow and the occasional call of a winter bird. About an hour into the journey, they spotted smoke rising in the distance. That'll be the Miller place, Patrick said, pointing. We should stop there first. Let Mrs. Miller know what happened. She's got a good heart, that woman. They altered course, heading toward the smoke. As they got closer, Mary could see a sturdy cabin with a barn and several outbuildings. Chickens scratched in the snow near the front door. A dog barked at their approach. A woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She was maybe 40, with graying hair pulled back in a bun and sharp eyes that took in everything at once. Behind her came a tall man with a weathered face and suspicious expression. Sergeant Patrick, the woman said warmly. Didn't expect to see you out in this weather. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Miller. Patrick tipped his hat. We've got a situation that needs your help. Mr. Miller's eyes landed on Mary and narrowed. That's the Comanche woman from the edge of the settlement. What's she doing with you? She's the situation, Patrick said calmly. He dismounted and helped Mary down, Grace still bundled against her chest. Found her and her baby nearly frozen to death last night. Storm caught them out in the open. We need your help. Mrs. Miller's expression changed immediately. She hurried forward, pushing past her husband. Dear Lord, let me see that child, Mary hesitated. But something in the woman's face made her pull back the blanket. Mrs. Miller peered at Grace, her experienced eyes checking the baby's color, her breathing, the warmth of her skin. She looks good now. But she was in bad shape? Mrs. Miller asked. Nearly lost her, William confirmed. Was touch and go for a while there. Mrs. Miller looked up at Mary, really looked at her. Not seeing a Comanche widow or an outsider, just seeing a mother who'd almost lost her child. Come inside, she said firmly. Both of you. You need proper food and rest. Now wait just a minute, Mr. Miller started, but his wife cut him off. Hush, Thomas. This is my kitchen and these are my rules. I'll not turn away a mother and baby who need help, not ever. You want to argue about it? We can have that conversation later. Something in her tone said there'd be no argument. Mr. Miller's jaw worked, but he stepped aside inside. The cabin was warm and smelled like fresh bread and coffee. Mrs. Miller settled Mary in a chair by the stove and immediately set about heating soup and fetching clean cloths. When did you last eat a proper meal? She asked, ladling thick beef soup into a bowl. 2 days ago, maybe 3. Mary admitted. It's hard to remember. Well, we'll fix that right now. Mrs. Miller set the bowl in front of her with a chunk of bread. Eat. Don't be shy about it. The soldiers filled the kitchen, making it feel crowded but somehow safe. Patrick was explaining everything to Mr. Miller, who listened with his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. So you want us to take her in? Mr. Miller said flatly when Patrick finished. I want you to help her get on her feet. Patrick corrected. She needs work, a safe place to stay, a chance to provide for her daughter. That's all any of us need, really. She's Comanche, Mr. Miller said, as if that explained everything. She's a widow with a baby, Mrs. Miller countered, checking on Grace, who was awake now and looking around with curious eyes. Just like Mrs. Henderson down the way. Just like the Peterson girl after her husband died of the fever. You didn't have any problem helping them. That's different. How? Mrs. Miller's voice was sharp now. How exactly is it different, Thomas? 'Cause she's got darker skin? Because she was raised different than us? This baby need food any less? This mother love her child any less? The kitchen fell silent. Everyone watched Mr. Miller, waiting to see which way he'd fall. Finally, he sighed and rubbed his face. You always do this to me, Helen. Make me feel small for thinking small thoughts. That's because I married you knowing you were better than your worst instincts, Mrs. Miller said. But her voice was softer now. I'm just reminding you of the man I know you can be. Mr. Miller looked at Mary for a long moment. She met his gaze, not challenging but not backing down either. Grace chose that moment to let out a small sound, drawing his attention. "How old?" he asked G. "Roughly 6 months," Mary said quietly. "Same age as our grandson," Mrs. Miller added. "Lives in Kansas now. We don't get to see him much." Something shifted in Mr. Miller's face. He walked over and looked down at Grace properly for the first time. The baby blinked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "We got a spare room over the barn," he said finally. "Needs cleaning out, but it's solid. Warm enough. You'd have to work for your keep. Cooking, cleaning, helping with the animals. It's not charity. You understand?" Mary's heart leaped. "I understand. I'm not afraid of hard work. Can you sew?" Mrs. Miller asked. "Yes, I can cure hides too. Make good, strong leather." "There's always need for that," Mr. Miller admitted. "Folks around here pay decent for quality work." "So it's settled then," Mrs. Miller said, smiling. "You'll stay here. We'll get that room fixed up proper. It'll be good having a baby around the place again." Mary felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank us by making a life for yourself and that little one," Mrs. Miller said. "That's thanks enough." Sergeant Patrick caught Mary's eye and nodded. She nodded back, understanding passing between them without words. He'd kept his promise. He'd helped her find a place. The soldiers stayed for lunch, filling the cabin with noise and laughter. They told stories about the night in the storm, about how Grace had fought her way back from the edge. They made it sound like an adventure instead of a tragedy that almost was. When it was time for them to leave, Mary walked outside with Grace to see them off. The afternoon sun was bright on the snow, almost blinding. "Thank you," she said to each of them, "for everything. You saved our lives. You saved your own life," Patrick said. "We just helped a little." "More than a little," Mary insisted. Danny leaned down from his horse. "Take care of that little girl. Always," Mary promised. They rode away slowly, 5 soldiers heading back to the fort. Mary watched them go, these unlikely heroes who'd seen past fear and prejudice to find compassion. Mrs. Miller came out and stood beside her. "Good men, those." "The best," Mary agreed. "Come on then," Mrs. Miller said. "Let's get you and this baby settled. Thomas is already clearing out that room. He'll never admit it. But he's got a soft heart when you get past the rough edges." Mary followed her inside, Grace warm and alive in her arms. For the first time in 2 years since her husband had died and left her alone in a world that didn't want her, Mary felt something like peace. She had a place to stay, work to do, people who'd given her a chance. But more than that, she had hope. Real solid hope that tomorrow might be better than today, that Grace might grow up safe and loved, that the world, for all its cruelty, still had room for kindness. The storm had passed. Spring would come again, and Mary, running deer caught between 2 worlds, had finally found a foothold in both. She looked down at Grace, who gazed back at her with absolute trust. "We're going to be all right, little bird," Mary whispered. "We're finally going to be all right." And for the first time, she believed it. 3 months had passed since that frozen night, and the Texas prairie was beginning to show signs of spring. Green shoots pushed through the last patches of snow. Birds returned to build their nests. The air still held a chill, but it carried the promise of warmth to come. Mary stood in the doorway of her room above the Miller barn, watching Grace play with a wooden rattle Mr. Miller had carved. The baby was sitting up now, laughing and babbling, full of life and curiosity. It was hard to believe this was the same child who'd nearly died in the snow. "Mary," Mrs. Miller called from the main house. "Come have some coffee." "Grace, too." Mary bundled the baby and made her way across the yard. Over the past months, this walk had become familiar, comfortable, almost like home. Inside, Mrs. Miller had fresh biscuits cooling on the counter. The kitchen smelled like honey and butter. It was a smell Mary had come to associate with safety. "Sit, Mrs. Miller said, pouring coffee. "I want to talk to you about something." Mary's stomach tightened. Had she done something wrong? Was Mrs. Miller going to ask her to leave? "Don't look so worried," Mrs. Miller laughed, settling across from her. "It's good news. The Henderson family, the Peterson widow, and half a dozen others have been asking about your leather work. They want to know if you'd take on more orders. Seems word has gotten around about how good you are." Mary felt relief wash over her. "Really? Really? You've got a talent, Mary. People are starting to see it." "Starting to see you?" Mrs. Miller reached over and squeezed her hand. I told you things would get better. They had gotten better slowly but surely. At first, some of the neighbors had been cold to Mary. They'd stare or whisper when she came to town. But Mrs. Miller had a way of standing beside her that made people think twice about being cruel. And Mr. Miller, for all his initial reluctance, had become a fierce defender once he'd made up his mind. There's something else, Mrs. Miller continued. The spring social is coming up. It's a gathering we do every year. Music, dancing, food. All the families come. I'd like you to come too, you and Grace. Mary's first instinct was to refuse. A social meant crowds, questions, judgment. But then she thought about Grace. Her daughter was going to grow up in this community. Mary couldn't hide forever. Couldn't keep Grace isolated because of her own fears. All right, Mary said quietly. We'll come. Mrs. Miller's face lit up. Good. That's real good, Mary, you'll see. People aren't all bad once you give them a chance to surprise you. The day of the social arrived bright and clear. Mary dressed carefully in a simple dress Mrs. Miller had given her, braiding her dark hair in a style that honored both her Comanche heritage and her present life. Grace wore a little white gown that Mrs. Miller had sewn herself. As they walked into the gathering, Mary felt every eye turned toward them. The music faltered for a moment. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Then Mrs. Miller was there, linking her arm through Mary's. Come on. I want you to meet some people properly. She steered Mary through the crowd like a ship through rough waters, introducing her to families, making it clear through her presence that Mary was under her protection. Some people were stiff and formal. Others warmed up when they saw Grace cooing over the baby who smiled at everyone. Mary running dear, as I live and breathe. Mary turned to see Sergeant Patrick standing there in clean civilian clothes, a genuine smile on his weathered face. Behind him stood William, Danny, Robert, and Joseph. All 5 soldiers who'd saved them that night. Sergeant! Mary felt her face break into a smile. I didn't know you'd be here. Wouldn't miss it, Patrick said. Heard you were doing well. Wanted to see for myself. He looked at Grace, who'd grown so much since that night. Look at this little lady. Strong and healthy. Thanks to you, Mary said softly. Thanks to you, Patrick corrected. You walked through a blizzard to save her. Never forget that. Everything that came after started with a mother's love. The other soldiers gathered around, taking turns admiring Grace and catching up with Mary. Their presence drew attention, but it was different now. People watched with curiosity rather than hostility. If these respected soldiers treated Mary like a friend, maybe they'd misjudged her. As the evening went on, Mary found herself relaxing. She sat with a group of women, including the Peterson widow, who'd also lost her husband young. They talked about children, about the challenges of making a life alone, about the small victories and everyday struggles. It's not easy, Mrs. Peterson said, rocking her own baby. Some days I wonder if I'm doing anything right. Every mother wonders that, Mary said. Comanche, white, Mexican, we all worry about the same things. We all love our children the same way. Mrs. Peterson looked at her thoughtfully. I suppose we do, don't we? Later, as the musicians struck up a lively tune, Mr. Miller surprised everyone by asking Mary to dance. It was a simple folk dance, nothing fancy, but the gesture meant everything. If Mr. Miller, who'd been so hesitant at first, would dance with her in front of the whole community, it sent a powerful message. As they moved through the steps, he spoke quietly. My wife was right about you. She usually is. You're a hard worker and a good mother. That's all that matters in the end. Thank you for giving me a chance, Mary said. Thank you for proving me wrong about my own prejudices, he replied. That takes courage, too. As the night wore on, Mary found herself standing at the edge of the gathering, holding Grace and watching the celebration. Danny approached, holding 2 cups of punch. Thought you might be thirsty, he said, offering her one. Thank you. Mary took a sip. This is nice. All of this. I never thought you'd belong? Danny finished. Yeah, I know that feeling. When I first joined up, I was the youngest, the greenest. Didn't think I'd ever fit in with men like the sergeant. But he gave me a chance, taught me that belonging isn't about where you're from. It's about who you choose to be. Grace reached for Danny's face, her tiny hand patting his cheek. He laughed and made a funny face at her, drawing out her delighted giggles. She likes you, Mary observed. What's not to like? Danny grinned. I'm very likable. As the evening drew to a close, Patrick gathered his men to leave. They were heading back to the fort at dawn. Mary walked with them to their horses, Grace drowsy in her arms. "Will I see you again?" she asked. "Count on it," Patrick said. "We check in on our friends regular like." He paused, then added, "That night in the storm, when you said, 'Take me last, save my baby first,' that stuck with all of us. Reminded us why we do what we do, who we're supposed to be. So really you saved us as much as we saved you." Mary felt tears prick her eyes. "I'll never forget what you did." "Neither will we," William said. "Take care of yourself, Mary. And that little one." They rode off into the darkness, 5 men who'd proven that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it's fighting battles. Sometimes it's choosing mercy over vengeance. Sometimes it's just seeing the humanity in someone the world tells you to hate. Mrs. Miller found Mary standing there watching them go. "Come on back to the house. Thomas has the fire going. We'll have one more cup of coffee before bed." As they walked back together, Mary realized something profound. She'd spent so long trying to figure out where she belonged, whether she was more white or more Comanche, more this or more that. But belonging wasn't about choosing one identity over another. It was about finding people who'd accept all of who she was. The Comanche had taught her strength, resilience, and respect for the land. Her birth family had given her life. Her husband had given her love and grace. The soldiers had given her hope. And the Millers were giving her a chance to build a future. She was all of these things, all of these stories, and Grace would grow up knowing all of them too. That night, as Mary tucked Grace into bed in their room above the barn, she sang to her daughter. Comanche lullabies and hymns her birth mother had sung, old songs and new. Grace's eyes grew heavy, her breathing deep and peaceful. "You're going to grow up knowing you're loved," Mary whispered. "You're going to grow up knowing that people can be good, even when the world is hard. You're going to know that your mother walked through a blizzard for you, that 5 soldiers chose kindness, that strangers became family. You're going to know all of it, little bird. Every beautiful, difficult piece." Grace slept, safe and warm, while outside the Texas stars shone bright over a land that held countless stories. Stories of loss and survival, stories of hate overcome by love, stories of mothers who'd do anything for their children, stories of people who chose to be better than their fears. And in a small room above a barn, one of those stories continued. A story that had begun with a desperate plea in the snow and had become something greater. A story about how one moment of courage, one choice to see humanity instead of difference can change everything. Mary Running Deer had walked through the storm. She'd fallen and risen. She'd begged for her child's life and been answered by the most unlikely heroes. And now she stood on the other side of that long winter night, not just surviving, but beginning to truly live. The world was still hard. Prejudice still existed. Challenges still lay ahead, but Grace was alive. They had a home. They had people who cared. And sometimes that's everything. Sometimes that's more than enough. Sometimes that's exactly what hope looks like.